I'm so excited to be joining you today and talking about how to recover after narcissistic abuse because isn't that what we all want to know? When you get out of these toxic relationships and you are a mess. I've lately been thinking back to those days. I mean, it's kind of hard to go there, painful to go there. And man, it was brutal. I'll tell you, I was a mess. I was confused. I wasn't for sure what happened. I really wanted him taking responsibility for his part in it. I felt like I couldn't stop talking about it, and I was bleeding everywhere about the pain that I had just suffered. I felt like a walking wound that everybody had to hear, like the whole version. I just couldn't like stop talking about it. How many of you can relate to this? That when you step out of these relationships and you just feel completely broken. Bridget, I hear you. You said I've been sobbing all day. Yeah, it's painful to be in these relationships is so brutal and so confusing. So I want to talk about the three most important first steps that we should all take when you first leave a narcissistically abusive relationship. But I also want you to know that you're getting a taste of what you experience if you join me in Healed and Empowered group coaching that starts this week. So for 12 weeks, we're going to be diving in live to these topics and talking about how to dig out. I almost likened it like thorns. It's like there's something about a narcissistically abusive relationship that they implant these almost like, and I don't really want to say hypnotic suggestions, but they're like wounds, these poisonous wounds, and we hit these emotional spots in our life and then boom, we're right back there. You hear them talking in your head or you hear that criticism and you can read every book under the sun, you can watch every video that you can on narcissistic abuse, you can self-talk yourself out of whatever it is that you think is going on, but it still just continues to persist, these like thorns, these wounded spots that get activated. I don't really want to call triggered, but they're activated. So, is there a way to get through this and to get over it faster? I really believe that there is. I believe that there is. I feel like I know there's not a lot of treatment yet, treatment modalities for narcissistic abuse. And if you're new here, I'm Dr. Kerry Kerr McAvoy. I'm a licensed psychologist with over 20 years of counseling experience. And I know there's not currently a solid treatment modality. Obviously, they say deal with the trauma first because 75% of all narcissistic abuse victims have PTSD. So no, that is not your imagination thinking that you're not functioning well. You're not functioning well when you leave these toxic relationships. So that's the first piece is to calm down the overactive nervous system. But there's a whole host of other things that we got to deal with. We have to deal with the euphoric recall, the cognitive dissonance, the lack of closure, all the unresolved grief, all the struggles with anger, the fact that our social support system has been decimated and probably isn't that healthy. There's a whole host of things that has to be dealt with when we exit these toxic relationships. And that's what we're going to be talking about in this 12-week group coaching that starts this Thursday evening, 6 p.m. from 6 to 7:15, goes on just till right after Thanksgiving. And I'm super excited. And if you feel like you need the help, this is something that I want to really urge you to consider being a part of. So what's the first steps that we should all be doing about healing? What's the first things that we should be doing? Well, I want you to know that when you first step out of a toxic relationship, you are in a stuck chronic mode of fight or flight, just stuck. That's it's in overdrive and it's been in overdrive for a while. And so part of the challenge is re-regulating it and learning. I'm trying to get my notes up, but learning how to actually like calm it down, to focus on new things, to learn the strategies to be able to soothe yourself. And it's tough because it's kind of a multi-dimensional problem. One you may be in a legal battle with your ex, or a custody issue with your ex, so you got to have contact around that. And you all know how getting an email, even from their attorney, or seeing a text message or anything that reminds you, or like some motion happens or something's coming up and you have that flood of feelings that you have all over again, you're going to have continual experiences of being triggered by them. But there are ways of learning how to calm yourself down. And the first trick to this is diaphragmatic breathing or deep breathing. If you've ever been in choir or have learned to play like a wind instrument, or some kind, like I'm thinking a saxophone, or you learn to play flute or something, or clarinet, something like that, then you've learned to breathe properly. You've learned to breathe from your gut. But the first trick to do that, I know there's videos out on this, is to learn to breathe diaphragmatically, deep breathing. But the other part is to know that you need to stop and breathe. Often we get into these positions of being worked up and we don't know that we need to stop and breathe. So part of the challenge becomes actually learning to, oh, thank you so much for that gift, learning to slow down and recognize that you're kind of like flustered. Like I realized that I went into this live hot, like head on. And that's because I always get a little nervous before I go live. But it's important for me even now to like stop, slow down, take a deep breath. And then just even the process of that is amazing how it will, like you can tell, my tone of my voice dropped a little bit. The speed of my speech slowed down a little bit. So the power of learning how to manage your breath, use meditation, use mindfulness. I know, okay, true confession time. How many of you guys heard of mindfulness, but do you know what it actually is? Have you learned any of the techniques? I mean, it sounds really fantastic. Like, who doesn't want to be mindful? Oh, yeah, I want to be mindful. But I don't think most of us actually get into what it is. It simply put is learning to observe your experiences, your feelings, what's going through your mind in a non-judgmental way. You don't weigh it out as worse than or less than any other experience. You just observe it with curiosity. But there's ways of learning mindful meditations and learning how to be with ourselves that's non-judgmental, that's very accepting, very safe. But so many of us, think about that as opposed to being in a toxic relationship. Toxic people, and I use that term toxicity because I don't want to just talk about narcissists. I'm talking about anybody that is not safe. That's really who I'm referring to. But when you're with a not safe person, they're critical, they invalidate, they're dismissive. It makes it really hard for us to be ourselves, to feel good in our skin. We feel like we're not good enough, or we're not doing enough, or we're not being enough, or that we're too much. We end up feeling like one of these things that is just not okay. So what's nice about mindfulness is that it gives you a way of relearning how to be with yourself that's different, that's accepting, that's unconditional. Because if you aren't, then who else will? Most of us don't have people in our life that are that open and that supportive unless you have a fantastic therapist. And I know how many of us are super struggling to find that. The join the group therapy on Thursday night there's a link in my bio. And for those of you who are on YouTube, it's actually a link in the notes. So if you go to my bio where it says, Kerry McAvoy, comma or / link, I think it's maybe / you know what I mean. And it says link. If you go there, it's right near the top. That's how you can join. And if you'd like to learn more information, then be sure to, and if it's not there, I'll double check right after here to make sure it should be. It should be. So that's the first thing, is to calm down the overactive nervous system, which is so tough. But I also want to super, super caution you. You've got to limit your contact with your toxic ex. You just have to. I didn't in the beginning. I was looking back recently because it's kind of curious of how long I talked to him. He walked out mid-July of 2019. I think I sent my last note to him in early September and said, I'll be sending the divorce papers when they come through, but don't plan to hear from me again. And then I blocked him. So that was really but I did hear from him again in March. I take that back. I heard again from him about 9 months afterwards. And then after that conversation, which, like, is any conversation with these people ever go well? It did not. I then for sure, like, just everywhere, cut him right off. I cut him off. I don't know why I left my email open, but I stopped communicating with him by text right around the time that I got divorced. but it's tough. I'm struggling with it. Now, granted, in 2019, we weren't talking a whole lot about this. It wasn't like I had a lot of advice, but I know a lot of us struggle with that. We struggle with doing that because you want, I mean, for me, I can't speak for you, but I know for me, I wanted the answers that I somehow thought he was going to give me. And I also there's a part of me, if I'm being super, super vulnerable, I kind of hoped he would regret his decision. He'd circle back and wanna now again, I didn't understand the dynamics of hoovering. Please hear me. This is what I wanted, but this is what I know better about now. And I can tell you why don't do this, don't do that. But I kind of wanted him to sort of choose me, realize that the next relationship was a mistake and come back to me. But here's what I know about narcissists now. So please hear this caution. Narcissists don't ever see people for people. You weren't significant to this person. Your desire to be chosen by them is not possible because they don't choose anybody. They don't even choose their own children. They are looking for pleasure, profit, or pleasure, profit, or there's one more. I heard Dr. Ramani gave these three great things that they're always looking for: pleasure, profit, or shoot, was another P. But they're looking for influence or what asset, some asset they can get from you. So really be careful because it wasn't you. They didn't get to know you. They didn't love you unconditionally. They didn't choose to be with you. They just chose to hang out with what they could get off of you. Yeah, power. Yes, thank you. Pleasure, profit, and power. That's the only three things they're looking for. So it wasn't you, it was the way that you showed up in those three ways. So even if they circle back, what's going to happen is you're going to get it worse than you did the time that were there before. Because in their mind, they're like, well, they know who I am. And they took me back just as I am. So that means they're in for it because who'd be dumb enough to do that? That means they've just signed up on the dotted line for all the crap I'm going to level out onto them. So be super, super careful about that. So that's the first thing to repair your damaged self-confidence, your damaged self-esteem. For those who are just joining, we're talking about the first three steps that you should be taking to heal from your narcissistic relationship. If you're discombobulated, you're struggling to recover, you're feeling super confused, you can't stop crying, you feel like just decimated, the first thing to do is you need to calm your overactive nervous system. Break off contact, begin to use deep breathing and meditation and mindfulness. And for those of you who missed it, I am launching a Healed and Empowered group coaching that starts this Thursday night at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. So you're looking for help. This is the first step that we're going to be working on together. And I'm super excited and I would love to have you join and be a part of it. Okay, I'm going to launch into number 2. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Kerry McAvoy. I'm a licensed psychologist with over 20 years of counseling experience. Number 2 is, have you noticed that your support system probably isn't very good? Unfortunately, most of us who get into these types of relationships, either because of what happens in the relationship or because we already were used to sort of narcissistic relationships or toxic relationships, we find our support system not healthy. So it may have been decimated by the relationship where you lost everybody because the toxic person urged you to shove them away, push them away so that they didn't have to compete, so they could control you. And so that you also weren't getting other information from other people. They didn't want you to be at risk of getting advice that would suggest that your partner wasn't good or that maybe there's another way of thinking about things. So they isolate you to control you. They isolate you in order to keep you from getting help. And they isolate you because they are isolated themselves and they don't want you to have any better thing than they have. They want you to be just as bad off as they are. So most of us end up in these relationships, and by the time that we're done, we find that we just don't have a good support system. It's been really affected. Or we find out, like a lot of us, that our support system wasn't really healthy. I know for me, when I got out, I started really assessing the people that I was letting close, women friends included. And I discovered a lot of people that I had been friends with were really toxic. They invalidated a lot. They were dismissive. They wanted me to show up, and I knew how to do that because I'd been doing it for everybody. But then when it came time for them to show up for me, it wasn't going so well. There was a lot of misses. So you end up finding that your support system's not healthy. So the challenge becomes learning how to assess that, recognizing what healthiness looks like in friendships, in family, and then figuring out how you're going to then manage that. Like, are you going to cut them all off? Are you going to go limited contact? How are you going to reduce the toxicity so that you're healthier now that you're trying to get healthier everywhere and you're no longer in this relationship? One of the common things that victims do in who get trapped in these relationships, and this was found roughly like 67 or more percent of us do this thing of called we give blind trust, we don't make people earn trust. That was certainly true for me. I don't, in fact, I knew I had this weird rule. One of the weird rules for me because I grew up in a really dangerous family system with predatory people like psychopathic people, and I learned don't trust my family. They had to earn it. They had to show up. I would be really suspicious, but I figured the world had to be better. Now, why would I make that kind of conclusion? I don't know, but I had made that conclusion. You may have made a odd conclusion too that you may not realize there's been rule for you. So for me, it really took me to standing back and saying, no, the people aren't safe. People need to show that they are worthy of my trust, and I need to learn how to give trust to people who have earned the right to my trust. That actually just blind. Here's pain. I'm going to hit you with another painful thought. Blindly giving away trust disrespects you. Blindly giving away your trust is disrespectful to you. Why am I saying that? Because you're worthy of people who earn the right to have a relationship with you. Not everyone has earned that right. And unfortunately, blind trust says, I'm an open door and everybody's allowed into my house. No, not everybody is allowed in my house. Then why should everyone be allowed to have a relationship with you? They don't. They haven't earned that right. So one of the hard things we have to do is to change that so that we're careful about who we let into our lives and even to recognize what does toxicity look like. And I'm so excited. I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a preview. So hold on to this thought because I'm not opening the products. You can't buy it today or join today, but later this fall, I'm going to start launching and advertising a new 12-week group coaching called Predator Detection Masterclass. It's how to spot and avoid toxic people. And what we're going to talk about is not only how they show up and get better at recognizing the signs, but what to do when they start to manipulate us, because they do. This is the ugly little thing that we don't talk about. Yes, I agree. We need boundaries, but boundaries is not enough. Boundaries is not enough. Toxic people are masterful at playing us at both ends. They'll see a boundary that we have and they'll push on it in a way that makes you feel mean. It'll make you feel like you're a bad person for doing this. And there's no way out of that bind. You will be, in your mind, in your experience, uncomfortable with yourself. So getting out of the manipulations, and they're very good at these strategies. They know how to wrap us up to where there's going to be pain with a healthy decision. So how do we handle that when we get into one of these tricky situations in which they've maneuvered us into this? And that's the thing. You can't just have good boundaries. If good boundaries worked, and there's so much information on good boundaries, then none of us would be in trouble. Because boundaries, we've been talking about boundaries. I remembered when it even showed up. Boundaries showed up around the 1990s. And one of the first authors that was talking a whole lot about it was in the Christian circles by Cloud and Townsend. I remember it clearly. It was very popular in the church that I was in. But here's the thing. It's been around now nearly 30 years. And if boundaries was all that we needed to get healthier, we would be healthy. These relationships wouldn't be happening. But if you ask yourself about what happened in the toxic relationship, you're going to notice that it was not just a matter of you knowing your limits. You knew your limits, but they put you in a position and made you feel cruel or unkind or not good. And you didn't like the way that it breached the integrity of you. You felt like to do that was self-betrayal. So you went ahead and let them manipulate you. That's why boundaries don't just work. We need to know how to do this interpersonally so that we can live with ourselves for acting the way that we do in our best interest. It's not hard to know what's in our best interest, but it's hard to act in our best interest. So keep an eye out for later this fall when I launch better or the let's see, what am I going to call it? I'm calling it master. I know I'm calling it best predator detection masterclass, or yeah, predator detection masterclass. So watch out for that. That will happen later in this fall. So we need to connect better with so the number two is we need to develop a healthier support system. And that may mean you're going to start small. Here's what mine looked like. Mine started out with me. I mean, I exited that relationship, and you think about it, 2019, and my son's cancer treatment stopped March of 2020. Well, what happened in March of 2020? We went into lockdown for COVID. So here I am working for myself, living in my little studio, writing Love You More, my book. For those of you who don't know, I wrote a book about what happened to me, Love You More. So here I was stuck in my little studio writing Love You More, living alone, seeing nobody for a year. I was going to have to become friends with myself because I had no other. That was my whole social support system was myself. But it's important. I think I learned some really big lessons. And I think that's a critical piece of it is learning to become your own friend. Do you actually know what that means? It means choosing yourself as a friend, showing up for yourself as a friend. We often get so, stuck in our own experience that we don't know what it looks like to show up for ourselves. So I had an outstanding exercise that my clinician, my therapist gave me, and I really loved it. It helped me so much. I'm going to give it to you guys. And that is, she asked me this: whenever you're upset or you're feeling something that's distressing, ask yourself, is this an old feeling or a new feeling? Is this an old feeling or a new feeling? Old feelings come out of childhood and they're unresolved. And new feelings are things that you as an adult, you know how to deal with it. I mean, if you do I pay my taxes? How do I pay my taxes? Well, you're an adult. You can figure out who to reach out to, who knows something. An old feeling, though, is something that's hung around and just doesn't have good processing because it was something you struggled with since you were a child. So what you do then is to say to yourself, okay, I know how to show up for a friend. I know how to show up for my kids. Then show up that way for yourself. Literally imagine you inside of you, the adult you, the loving you, coming to that wounded part of you that's hurting or scared or shaken, and say, hey, I'm here. Doing all the things that you would normally do for that you would do for others, suddenly do for them for yourself. And it's amazing how helpful that was, because it sounds kind of corny, but it really worked. It worked super well for me. So that's how I began to learn how to care for myself and to become my first part of my healthy support system was with me. And then I started to slowly let people in by building trust and making sure that there was reciprocity and making sure that I felt safe in my skin when I was around them, making sure that I felt like they accepted me and they weren't putting me in some kind of box. So pay attention to how people make you feel. So that's the second step that's super helpful. And I'm going to stop again. For those of you who this is what is this? I'm doing a pre-launch of what the group coaching is going to be like on Thursday night. We're going to do discussion, education, exercises, skill building. It's going to be launched Thursday night at 6 p.m. It's called Healed and Empowered for 12 weeks. I'd love to have you guys be a part of it. There's a few spots open. And we're going to be talking about how to heal and recover after we have been in a narcissistically abusive relationship. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Kerry Kerr McAvoy. I'm a licensed psychologist with over 20 years of counseling experience. So first step, you need to calm your overactive nervous system that's stuck in fight or flight. Second step, you need to reconnect with a healthier support system. And the third step, and this is a big one, this is one that we all have been dinged on hard, you need to repair your wounded self-esteem and self-confidence. Man, can I speak to that? How many of you guys felt like just decimated? Maybe before you got into this relationship, you were doing really great, doing big things. You felt you weren't letting things stop you. Maybe you were nervous about some things, but you were accomplishing things. And then you get into this relationship and it just like took all the winds right out of your sails. And now that you're out, you're finding it even hard to do new things. Like, you're like, do I want to meet people? Do I even want to leave my house? Maybe it's just going to be me and my animals or me and my pets for the rest of my life. You just feel so, shaken apart. So I'm going to give you some tips today on how to begin to repair a wounded self-esteem and wounded self-confidence, because it's like they implant like landmines inside of us. I swear. Sometimes I'm putting on a new outfit and I can hear him in my head. And the weird thing is, this is because I have perspective. I was married 31 years to a great guy and then had 2 years with this horrible guy. I don't hear that from my first marriage. I spent most of my adulthood with my first husband, and I don't have these harmful, hurtful, hanging things over my head. I don't. But I do over the 2 years I spent with that guy. Jeez. I mean, it's amazing how they just like prick us and just like get to us. So I want you to begin to watch the negative self-talk. Do you know what I mean? There's like a radio going on inside of your head where you're talking to yourself. Now, maybe not all of us have it in words. Some of us do, some of us don't. But you know what you're thinking. Even if you don't hear it in words, you know what you're thinking. But I want you to turn that radio up, that what you're hearing, whether it's words or feelings, I want you to turn it up and pay more attention. If you're feeling icky, you're feeling self-conscious, feeling scared or anxious, I want you to like turn it up. And then I want you to begin to pay attention to what the themes are that's happening in this self-talk. Like, what's it saying? What are you feeling? Like, can't trust anybody, or it's always me. I'm always the bad guy, or I'm always the bad person. Is it, I'm never enough, or no one's ever happy, or I'm just, nobody thinks I'm pretty, or whatever. I want you to begin to kind of hear it, because it's going to be a theme. There's a theme. Every one of us has like a song. That's how I call it. I call it our song that we play. This negative self-talk is like a consistent message. So I want you to hear what your message is. And then now this is going to sound hokey. I know it sounds like it's right out of SNL, where like, I don't remember the guy where he looked in his mirror and he put the big grin on and say, you are, no, I know it's going to feel hokey. I don't care. I don't care. It's hokey. I want you to get better. And this is a way to get better. I want you to make a positive statement that opposes the negative self-talk. Okay. So let's take one. Let's use one that's out of mine. Mine is, I'm never enough. I never can do enough for people to make them happy, or I'm too much. More for me, mine's I'm too much. I feel like I'm just a lot to ask for. So what would be a positive statement that is and opposes that negative thinking? It would be to say, no, because you're human and you're allowed to be who you exactly are. There's nothing wrong with you. Every person's unique. This is just the way you're unique. That's how I would, that's a long answer, but that's how I would oppose it. So I want you to hear the negative statement, and then I want you to write the positive statement that opposes it, that rejects it. And whenever you sort of hear the negative statement or feel it or feel like it, I want you to say the positive statement to yourself. I don't care you don't believe it. You're like, yeah, but I don't believe it. It doesn't matter. It still works. It still works. Here, I had a live demonstration of how powerful this is. I had a group of softball girls put their arms out. Now, these girls have been training their whole life. They were like 15 and they've been in softball since they were 4. They're strong. They throw balls. They throw balls the distance I could never throw a ball. They hit the balls and like home runs. I can't do that. So I had them stand with their arms out, and I had a friend stand across from them. And then I asked them to think of one or two statements. I am weak, or I am strong. They weren't to tell the partner what statement they were saying to themselves in their head. They were just to say over and over, I am weak, or I am strong, I am strong. Would you believe that the person across from them who tried to shove their arms down could not shove those who said, I am strong, down? But the ones who said, I am weak, their arms fell. They just dropped. It didn't matter that they didn't believe I'm weak, because all these girls were strong. They weren't weak. But the statement of saying to themselves, I am weak, weakened them. So you making a powerful statement about yourself of the truth, I don't care you don't believe it. It will still strengthen you. It will still affirm you, and it'll still give you an advantage of you being able to take action in a way that you weren't being able to before because you've rephrased it in a new direction. There's power in what we say to ourselves, not what we believe, but what we say to ourselves. So I really want you to begin to make that as a regular habit. Notice what you're saying and then make the direct positive statement in opposing and begin to say that to yourself every time that you hear that narc in your head talking to you. You can really change your life. And then I'm going to give you another big tip off on how to help. And then I'm going to spend the last 30 minutes taking your questions. I know I've been talking at you, but I really wanted to give you something today helpful. The last one is we often then do the things to ourselves that are not nice or kind or helpful. Not only we not talk to ourselves well, but we also don't follow up with really helpful behavior. We often do things that are not real respectful of ourselves and certainly don't show good compassion. So, what I want you to do is begin to act towards yourself with good self care. Like, let's go back to say the statement. If I say, yeah, I'm just too much for everybody, they really struggle with me. What would be the way for me to show myself that I'm not too much? Well, it would be to do something that's supportive and kind. It would be maybe to, take something that I want that's kind of quirky me and say, yeah, you deserve that. Go do that. Go get that. Go enjoy that. So you take these hurtful kind of self-denial things that we tend to do, these ways that we just sort of like pin ourselves into a box, and we actively work against it to do the reverse, because self-love, I struggle with the word self-love, but I like self-care, good self-care. The way to show ourselves love, I mean, really think about it. How do you show others around you that you love them? You show up and do good things for them. You show up in wonderful ways. You say good things. You support them. So do those things for yourself. Do the self care for yourself. And it's amazing that just the act of doing that will make you feel better. Will begin to say that you feel respect for you're actually showing respect for yourself. You're caring for yourself and showing up for yourself. It's powerful. I think, people find out that I know it's been now 4 years that I've been out, but people hear, you've been out 4 years. And the truth of the matter is, it feels like a distant memory, like something that happened to me a long time ago. And at times, I'm not even for sure it's real. That's how it feels to me. It feels like, yeah, it's really resolved. Like something terrible happened that I survived, but it's like I had to learn to walk again, but I've spent so long since I've been walking and walking well. It's kind of distant memory. That's how it feels to me. I want that for all of you. I want that for all. You deserve that. Something terrible that happened that was a massive loss, a massive injury, and I want all of us not just walking through life, I want us running through life. So that's a tip off on how to start your healing. And I would love to have you join my Thursday group. This starts this Thursday for 12 weeks. It's called Healed and Empowered, and it's live every Thursday night. And I'd love to get to know you better through that. So I'm going to put my glasses on and I'm going to start to take your comments. I know you guys have been chatting. Thank you so much for letting me preach for the half an hour. I really, really appreciate it. Yes. So Palsy said I've had massive losses. Yes. I heard, yes, Ray, the class is appropriate for people who are not necessarily struggling with a romantic relationship. Please know this group is not exclusive for people who have been in a romantic relationship. Could be any type of a toxic relationship. Doesn't even need to be. Oh yeah. I want you, farm girl, to run through life. Anybody who's suffered a harmful relationship that has really taken a ding on your self-esteem, and you're feeling like you're struggling, then it really fits. Yeah, it's traumatic. Does the narcissist trauma bonded to the victim? No, they're not trauma bonded to the victim. No. And how do you stop blaming yourself when you're conditioned to believe that everything's your fault? Well, that's gaslighting. You've been gaslit to believe that. The first challenge is to recognize that it's gaslighting, that it's not. First of all, ask yourself this question, Tella. How could you have make things happen when you didn't have the power to actually make them happen? Like what they're blaming you for spilt milk, but you're in the other room. How's the spilt milk your fault? Often we end up buying into their accusations because we want their acceptance. So part of that is to let go of necessarily we won't be agreeing with them. We won't necessarily be getting their acceptance, but we can certainly see the truth of the situation by understanding our limitations, that we actually had no control in that situation. So challenge it. That's what I'm saying. Challenge the reality that you're to blame for everything, because you're not. It's just nobody has that kind of power and control. Yeah, Cody, that's a great question. Cody asks, why are there not any focus on borderline personality disorder and borderline abuse on the internet? A couple thoughts I have on that one, Cody. One is that the whole cluster B, or the whole group now referred to as antagonistic by the DSM-5, is all creates the sort of the same experience for victims. So whether or not you've been in a relationship with a psychopath or a borderline or a narcissist, you're going to have been in a very toxic relationship, and the abuse looks quite similar. So I think that's one reason, is that we're kind of, should we have named it narcissistic abuse? Maybe not. Maybe not. I think the other thing is creators stay away from it because people with or BBT get really brutal. They now I know those who are really working hard to heal, and I'm not talking about that group. Yes, BPD can heal. There's really great treatment. DBT is very effective with that group if they do it. And a lot of them get invested because they know their life is really rough and they don't like it that way. But if they don't do the work, their rage is like psychopathic rage. It's just insane. I mean, the way, think of Fatal Attraction. The person in Fatal Attraction that played the Glenn Close position is was a borderline personality disorder. Always an example of a borderline personality disorder, and they're scary. So we get a lot of hate if we do a lot of talking about it. I do once in a while kind of get close to that, but if you watch the comments whenever I do, it gets really, really nasty. I think because somebody's asking why do they get that way? I think borderline personality disorders really struggle with being maligned. I mean, if you think of, I've watched them historically. What happened? We first thought in the 80s that they were as a result of being sexually assaulted. Fatal Attraction with Glenn Close is the movie I'm talking about, with Michael Douglas and Glenn Close. It's an old movie. So at first we thought as a result of a lot of SA, and then so they went through a lot of theories, and they thought it's only women. No, that's not true. There are men who are BPD as well. And then it's just been gone through lots and lots of theories about what's happening. And I would say probably more trauma based than maybe narcissists are, but I still think it's a biosocial problem. Certainly there's some developmental issues too, I would think, but their instability makes them really scary. So yeah, it isn't. I know, Palsy. I feel the same. Palsy, I feel the same way. But because they're so unstable and they move into that psychopathic rage so easily, it gets really frightening. I mean, they either self harm or they harm other people when they're completely like their narcissistic wound makes them act out. Now, I'm not saying narcissists don't either. They do. But narcissists are moving on to supply really quick, and borderline personality disorder, the rejection is such a painful spot, such a point of damage for them, that they act out in rage, either towards themselves or someone else. So it tends to be something we struggle talking about. And also they want to put themselves as better than narcissists. It's not true. They can be just as damaging, just as harmful, if not more harmful than narcissists are. So but there's some reasons why, unfortunately. Borderline personality disorder. I appreciate your comment. They feel the fear of abandonment or the fear of engulfment is the two twin fears, which by the way are true for all of us. I got to hear Doctors Schnarf. Dr. Schnarf talk years ago at Cape Cod, a big conference on this. That's a twin fear of all of us. What causes the instability, the dysregulation? I think Marsha Linehan's work is really good on that. And I think that's why DBT is so powerfully effective, is that it's really important to teach how to regulate and self-soothe so that they don't act out, don't, but it's not, I can't say it's trauma caused or that it's abandonment caused, but I do know it's abandonment fears, which is a universal fear for all humans, by the way. We all have a bit of BPD in us too. I mean, anybody who says that's not a problem for them is not in touch with themselves, in my opinion. So Deb B. Thriver said she was abandoned as a child and grew up on orphanage. Interesting. So yeah, I'm not saying that doesn't happen. I'm not saying there isn't some real, like, okay, so I've had a lot of real abandonment, but that's not my issue. So you can be abandoned, not have that problem. But yeah, you can be abandoned and have be a problem. So definitely. Oh, fascinating. So Marsha Littlehan also struggled because of her own instability and her own dysregulation. Fascinating. Yeah, I love that question, Kerry. Kerry wants to know, why don't narcs not abandon and engulf us in turn? Well, they actually are. They do that, which is what it's interesting because narcissists are attracted to borderlines and borderlines are attracted to narcissists, not across the board, but that is one common combo that happens. But narcissists' need is they're more trying to regulate the shame, their need to be special and to feel like all the supply. So they're more seeking that first, whereas the borderline personality disorder is seeking connection. They want connection, but then they fear the connection. And the big struggle has been developmentally in psychology, which came first. Was a narcissist show up first in the developmental process, or does the borderline? Because they're kind of neck and neck on when they occur. If you look at the development of self and object permanence and self with object separation, they kind of occur kind of neck and neck. We're on the same periods of time. So oh, that's my ex says that to our daughter, that she loves you mostest of all. Yeah. Do narcissists inherently feel shame without doing anything? Yeah, I think narcissists, I think at their core would feel, if they could get in touch with it, which I don't think they're in touch with their core. So most of us are not super in touch with our core, if you're really honest about it. It's hard to get there, to really look at ourselves flatly in the mirror of our self-reflection and see who we are and see our deepest needs and deepest fears. It's hard for all of us. So I want to be compassionate towards everybody about that. But I do believe that at the core, the narcissist greatly fears there's something innately broken or fraudulent about themselves, that they're not enough. That they're just, if you knew who they really are or were, you wouldn't choose them. Now the problem is, because the hunger is so insatiable, the need for supply, the need for admiration, or the need to be the biggest victim in the room. Remember, the vulnerable narcissist is seeking your sympathy, where the other narcissists are seeking your admiration and attention. They are, because of that, then they do a lot of really nasty things that make it hard for them then to look at themselves as through time. So they start to become self-fulfilling prophecy, unfortunately. So somebody asked, did my ex say love you more? Oh, absolutely. The love was a competition, very much so, which is why I named the book Love You More, because if you get to the end of the book, you'll find out that I don't think he ever loved me. I really don't ever think he loved me at all. So borderline's asking me, so you're really okay grouping so generally that everyone has a little BPD claiming compassion. Well, I can hear that you're hurt or you're feeling upset with me. And it's a tough conversation. And I know that when I have anybody who has narcissistic traits in here, they find this a tough conversation too. What I'm saying is, I'm not saying I'm saying, and this is from experts, it's not just from me, is that we all have the need to be connected and we all fear being engulfed. Abandonment engulfment is a twin fear of every human. But I'm not saying every human struggles with a level of dysregulation that people with BPD do. No. I do think that there is some better ego strengths some of us have learned or have wired into us for various reasons, who knows exactly why, that makes us better at coping with loss and better coping with possible engulfment. So that's what I'm saying. Yes, I can hear that you're quoting me directly and you're getting upset with me about that. Yes, I hear that and I respect that you're angry. What I said was, what I meant to say, I was being casual with what I said. What I meant to say is that we all struggle with BPD issues of engulfment and abandonment. And I'm sorry that's invalidating. And I'm not being invalid. And I don't mean to be invalidating to anybody. Do I have any? All right. So this is a good example about why it's difficult to talk about this topic, because when there's a lack of ability for someone to be, no one speaks perfectly. We all struggle to like say exactly what we mean. And I'm on the spot reading 3 feeds. And as a result of 3 feeds, it's difficult for me to like read and be able to respond exactly the way that I want. But we need to give each other some leeway and some support. And that makes it really hard if you're going to listen to exactly what I say and then say I'm invalidating. Well, of course, words have meaning. I know that. Of course. And I'm saying that. Do you hear me say that? I'm saying that. Now you know why I don't like talking about this topic. It becomes difficult. Yeah. So, yeah. No one's perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. No, I don't need to explain myself. I know those of you who know me, who are familiar with my platform, you know my heart, and you also know, you know where I stand on stuff. Yeah. Thank you, Cody, for bringing this topic up. Thank you. I appreciate that. I think Cody was talking about his own experience and that was feeling like he feels alone, like we're not providing support for people who've been in relationships with other types of difficult people or difficult relationships. So, yeah. And I do agree with him that this is a hard spot because I don't want anybody to feel like they're on the outside of getting support that they're looking for. Yeah. So let's take another question. Why I'm getting upset or uncomfortable is because I'm being held to a high level of standard that is impossible on a live, just impossible. Do narcissists or consciously know what they're doing, or is it super deep where they don't know? I think Tella it's a both and answer to that question. I think that thank you, moderator, for that. I appreciate that. I think it's a both and question that some know what they're doing. I think the more sociopathic or psychopathic they are, the more that they're aware of it. And but I think there's a large group that isn't aware. They just know that they want things at their way. I had somebody who just gave me a terrible example where this person's ex-partner, was showing favoritism between 2 kids. So one kid was actually getting better presents, nicer presents than the other. And the children were aware of it. I mean, it's obvious, you can see it. And everyone around them can see it. But the narcissist was saying, no, it's completely fair. Now, does this person know that they're being unfair with their kids? Probably a little bit at some level, but I also think they justify a lot. So the minute they do something they know is inappropriate, they've already had an excuse that they've come up with to sort of explain the inappropriateness, to cover the inappropriateness. And that, I think that's the way that they get through it. So it's both an unconscious process, but it's also a conscious process, because they have to live with themselves. So they need to come up with a really good reason why they do what they do. It's really, but it happens so fast that I don't even think sometimes that they're aware what they did originally. They've already like come up with a justification. Like she deserves that, or he deserves that because they did blah, 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 blah. And they don't realize that what they've already done is kind of like jumped in. They've jumped in to cover the bad behavior that they've had. Yeah, repression. Somebody asked about repression. Do you guys know what repression is? Repression is, so there's all these defense mechanisms. It's fascinating. Freud started to identify some of them, and then Anna, his daughter, picked up and identified even more. There are things like one of the earliest one is splitting. I know that's a weird one. Splitting is like you see it with infants. We also see it with people, but if you see it, someone doing splitting, be careful. That means the person's really primitive in their thinking. So splitting is where somebody, like, when you do a good thing, you're really all good and perfect. But the minute you do a bad thing, they forgot you ever did a good thing. Suddenly you're all the worst person in the world. So you move from the best person in the world to the worst person in the world. That's splitting. They'll also do splitting where they'll play good cop and bad cop, where they'll set you up where one person comes in and does all the good stuff to make you feel trust, and then the other person does all the hard stuff to make you feel like angry and distrustful, and then they'll work against you. They'll do this in therapy a lot. They'll have like two therapists, like maybe a psychiatrist and then a therapist involved. And so they'll like play each other off at each other and then work each other against them. That's splitting. But then there's denial, compartmentalization, intellectualization, justification. Um, Repression is a higher level of denial. Denial is a matter of just saying, I don't see it. It's in front of me, but as long as I pretend that I'm not seeing it, I'm not seeing it. But repression actually is the mind, the unconscious mind steps in and says, no, 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 this person can't cope with it. We're going to like push the memory over here and they just won't access it. And we're going to pretend that it never happened. Those of you who know my story know that I was I was actually a toddler and suffered SA as a toddler. And for years, I forgot that it happened. And then it's suddenly, so I had repression. So I didn't remember. And then when the repression lifted and I remembered, it was like, oh, I always knew that. How did I forget that? It was really a weird feeling. It was a very super strange feeling. Splitting with the good cop, bad cop is actually a more sophisticated version of splitting. Yeah. So yeah, but they're kind of like, they depend on our developmental process. Um, Now you got me questioning that. Yeah, I'm pulling it up. Yeah, it is. It's a strategy of it. Um, it's playing both. It's a way that you get people to work against each other. In the way that you get people to act out different parts. It's a form of splitting. We talked about it all the time in therapy. I used to work with a firm that had social workers and psychiatrists in it. And so I may be seeing the same client as somebody else, and then they'll like complain to me or complain about the other guy, and then you'll go talk to the other guy, and then they'll say, they're splitting on us. They're causing us to work against each other. So then what we do is we kind of get our same plan together and come back and come in with a more unified treatment option or treatment program. And that's how we kind of close the split. So there's no splitting in it. No, dichotomous thinking isn't splitting. No, it's more sophisticated than that. You want to go back and look at Melanie Klein's work. Go look at Melanie Klein. She talks about the good mother, the bad mother versus the good breast and the bad breast. That's where it comes out of, is Melanie Klein. Yeah, my partner said love you more when he had me at the height of my love for him and I wanted to understand. Do you know what it meant, why he was saying love you more? I'd be kind of curious about that. Yeah, that's a good point you're making, Greta. A lot of these things aren't just simply one thing. So the perfect example of splitting is what the infant does with the mother when they're nursing. That's splitting. But when you get older, there's other strategies that come in and start to become a part of that. So yes, triangulation and manipulation is also a form of splitting. It can be acted out of splitting, can be a part of it. Could be like splitting starts it. I mean, it's very complicated. It's a very complicated process. Triangulation is whenever we bring in a third person to sort of either to strengthen our position, develop a better alliance, is a way to kind of work out a situation we don't want to deal with directly. We do triangulation for a lot of reasons. It's instead of dealing directly with somebody, we deal with somebody else we deal with it through a third person. That's kind of, and can I repeat about the infant? Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So I'll take this as the last question because we're coming up on my end of my time. Splitting happens. Imagine an infant is nursing. And maybe if you've ever, for those of us who've nursed or given a bottle to a baby, They first don't know how to take a bottle very well, or they don't know how to nurse. And there's always this mess when there's a moment when it's a mess. And the baby's getting wet and the milk isn't going in their mouth and all of that's happening and they're screaming. They're just like enraged. Their face is red and they're just melting down. And in that moment, there's if you were to extrapolate, because infants, newborns don't have thought, but if you like, they have feelings. They're sensory motor operated. But if they could articulate, they're enraged. You feel the rage because nothing's happening right. And in that moment, you're a bad mom. That's what Melanie Klein postulated, is that you're not coming through, and they feel this rage towards the maternal object. The minute when things go well and the nursing happens, that's fantastic, and that they're held and they feel warm and safe, then suddenly you're the perfect mom. You've come through in the most delicious, delightful way, and all's right in the world. So think of this black and whiteness, this dichotomy that's happened from you suddenly went from the worst mom to the best mom, and there's no awareness of ambiguity, no awareness that things are complicated and rarely black and white. So when we see splitting in real life, it is a sense of when you get something wrong or a miss, then everything about that person is wrong or bad. And then when that person hits it on good, then that person is perfect and right. What happens with narcissists when we meet them is they think we're the ideal object, but we're not. We're actually gray. We're a mix of good and bad. We're human. We're imperfect. But when we hit it right with them, they think though everything is just like the way it should be. But the minute you show up as real, or you fail to be exactly who you need to be to them, suddenly you're the worst person in the world. It's like you fall from grace. You go from, my mentor used to tell me, you were the nugget of gold that turns into a piece of shit. That's what happens. That's splitting. And that actually happened here. So we actually all got to watch splitting happen here. So, which is interesting. All right, we need to wrap it up. I got to head out to my group, Toxic Free Relationship Club. And this was interesting, you guys. This was very, very interesting. And I'll be back on Tuesday at 4 p.m. I loved hanging out with you. This is a fantastic, lively discussion, that's for sure. And we'll be back next week. Bye-bye.